Hello everyone, Jeff here. And in this week's video, we're going to be taking a look at the latest changes to the Antilia editor that I've been working on for the past few weeks. I'm going to be giving a demonstration of just kind of how to use the editor. So this is kind of more intended for the other Antilia developers right now, but I'm sure it'll also be of interest to anyone who has plans to potentially do some modding for Antilia down the road. Now, obviously, I'm going to continue to make changes, so things will look quite a bit different by the time the community gets their hands on this. There'll be more editors and more features. But I think right now in its early state, it's still kind of interesting to look at and kind of see how things are progressing. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a project here. So you'll notice we have this kind of new panels interface, and the top left panel is the project panel, and it does this flashing thing until you select project. Now for this demo, I'm going to try to start from scratch here. We're going to create a new project, kind of walk through creating a bit of content and then testing in the game. So here's the new create new project dialog. And the only things we really need here are a project ID, which I'm just going to call this, we'll just call it new mushrooms, and a title. And those are the only required fields, I believe. Everything else isn't required. Now, there are some options in here that I'm going to go ahead and check. This publish designs by default I'm going to check. That's something that on the development team, I want to make sure the developers hear this. Always make sure that's checked. Right now it doesn't matter, but pretty soon it will. So let's go ahead and start checking that every time we do that. And then the rest of these dependencies and stuff, we don't need to mess with. In fact, a lot of them don't have anything under them yet, but they will in the future. But for this demo, they're not necessary. So we've opened our new project. Now, the next thing we're going to need is some resources here, and I'm going to pull up this panel on the left, which is the resources panel. I've prepared for this a little bit by getting some resources together and putting them together in this little folder, and I'm just going to drag and drop this onto the editor here, and it's going to kind of analyze the file structure, and it's all ready to go really, so I can say import. It's going to add those files to my project, and I'll be able to load them here in a moment. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that we have our resources in here, is I'm going to go ahead and create a new design. A design is something like a mesh or a simulation object or a new tree. It basically means kind of like a file that's going to be edited. So we'll call this illuminated mushroom. And it is a simulation object, and we don't have to set up anything else for this. So we'll hit create. So this is the simulation object editor. And I'll very quickly just kind of set up just kind of a sample object that we're going to be placing in the game. Before I go any further, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I want to do. I think I'll go ahead and just start setting it up then. We'll start by adding a mesh component, which the default name mesh is fine. There's only going to be one mesh. And you'll notice this little save icon down here turned yellow. That happens anytime we make a change, just to remind us that there's changes that need to be saved. Let's go ahead and set up this mesh. We'll get it pointed at the resources. So there's the mesh. Let's edit the material. Let's get it set up with diffuse. And this one also, because it's illuminated, we're going to set a luminosity texture on it. Normally we wouldn't have to do that, but since this mushroom is kind of a nighttime thing, it glows in the dark basically, we're going to set the luminosity texture on it. So there it is. Now I do want to potentially resize this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a child scene node here, and we're going to call this mesh node. And I'm going to put this mesh underneath it. And now by doing that, now I have a node which I can move around and scale. The meshes and lights and stuff, you cannot move them or change their rotation or anything. To do that, you need a node. So that's why I added this little node. And now we have these really nice widgets. And this is what kind of delayed the video, was the lack of some good editing widgets. So now we have some nice widgets that we can use to move things around. You can see we've got some rulers and everything going on. We'll put that back at 0. And I think the scale on this has kind of come in okay. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. And next I'm going to add a light to it. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and create another scene node. We'll call this light node. And hopefully I'm not going too fast. I'm sure I'm probably raising a lot of questions. I'm kind of going through this kind of quickly. Next to the light node, we're going to add a light. But I imagine there's going to be more videos like this in the future. Ooh, that light's really large. Let's knock down the range to 10 or so. In fact, we can probably go down a little more. I'm going to take the intensity down too, because I know it needs to be around 0.3. The reason I added these scene nodes and stuff was when I went to set up this light, in particular, I had to change the position, and it still has, you know, these manual entry things. But when I started just manually entering numbers, it just seemed a bit mysterious what I was trying to do. So I think it's a little more obvious what I've done here is I've just moved this light up a little bit so it's kind of near the top of the mushrooms. So next I'm going to set up the color on this light. We're going to make it kind of a blue. I set the intensity down to 3. That's just kind of a multiplier that will affect how much the light affects things. And I am going to give it a little tiny bit of ambient, which just kind of helps fill in a little bit. So we're going to save that. Now, one more thing that we need to do before we're ready to test is we need to export this. So if I pull up the resource editor again, we're going to see when I do this, we're going to give this a name. We'll call it, and I apologize, this is another case where I'm just going to kind of give it a name here that I know is going to work. And I'm going to click this box, always export on save. So unfortunately, it did not refresh the resources browser. There's still little, not really bugs, but just little disconnects. So there's this thing, here's all the Antilia resources, but you can also filter to just what's been changed in the project. And when looking at all view, you'll notice also that the things that are affected by the project, there's one. So there's a very long list that needs to be cleaned up. Anyway, the things that are affected by the project, you'll notice they're blue with the little dot. They just look like this. So now you'll see we do have simulation objects, mushrooms, and here we should see our file. I'm not seeing it though. I'm trying to think why that might be. It might be that we're missing the file name. Oh, it's going in there for some reason. Okay. Well, we'll sort that out. Not a big deal. So next we're ready to start playtesting. So I'm going to go ahead and use this play button here. And the first time we do this, I'm just going to go ahead and, when you launch Antilia, you can go straight to the main menu, or you can do a couple things here like load a save game, which really just helps eliminate some of the tedious clicking steps over and over again. So we're just going to go straight to start a new game here. Now when we launch Antilia, I'm going to show this real quick. As soon as Antilia gets going here. So it goes straight into start new game, but you'll notice that the editor over here, it knows that Antilia is running and it's gone into a low frames per second mode. So that's trying to reduce performance, but it should be noted that there is a bit of a performance hit having multiple apps like this running. So the system requirements for using the editor will be a little bit higher than the game. So we're just going to call this test game 1. And you'll notice that in the content and mod sections, it's already put our new design, new mushrooms. It's already got it as part of the project. So we don't have to do anything here, but if you wanted to add a mod, this is where you would do it. So we'll go ahead and create the new game. And I'm just going to quickly create a test character. We'll make a Kisan. Don't often use Kisan. And I'm just going to kind of zip through here. I will turn on the music so it's not in recording. And we will just jump into game real quick just to verify that everything's looking good. And I guess I could go ahead and drop a few of those mushrooms in the game. So I'm going to wander around a little bit. Now, the forests aren't loaded. I'll fix that in a second. That's a deliberate choice I've been making to speed up loading. I'm going to move over here where the forests are going to be. just to verify real quick, I'm going to pull up the object spawner and see if our mushroom is listed in here. Oh, there it is, illuminated mushroom. So there it is. There's the object that we just created in the editor. And if we go to nighttime, get rid of some of this clutter, you'll see that this little mushroom is illuminated. So next what I'm going to do, we're going to close out of here. It'll detect it until it's done running and go back into normal mode. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit behind the scenes here to get those trees back in. What I'm going to do next is if I hit play, we can now pick load save game, and it's automatically going to detect, because of this checkbox down here, show saves which include project. So it'll filter this to just the games that are actually related to this particular project. And we'll go ahead and pick our character. Please ignore there's a little bit of like a flashing effect that's happening because of these drop-down boxes. That's a known bug. There's so many other things that were more important to get working than that particular bug. So I'm trying to think if there's anything we want to change. Let's go ahead and just launch the game again. And you'll see now that we've got this all set up, it'll remember these settings. So from now on, whenever I want to test with this, I can just hit play. In the future, we might make it so if you like hit shift play, maybe it'll even skip this little dialogue. It'll just go straight into Antilia. That makes it really, there's still a loading screen we have to deal with each time, but it's so nice to not have to click through a bunch of options, potentially misclick things, load the wrong save game. It's real nice to be able to just go straight into the game. And okay, so we're back in game here. And just for a little bit of fun, I'm going to go ahead and set it to nighttime. And we'll pull up our object spawner again, and we're just gonna, just for a bit of fun, I'm gonna run around in this little forest here and spawn some of these mushrooms. So one more thing I want to show real quick. I'm going to kind of do this again a little bit faster this time. And I'm going to try to, real quick, just put a little structure over here. And we'll see how that goes. So to do that, we'll create a new design. Okay, it looks like we need these to reset when I click that new button. So that's a good little note. Structure 1, and again it's a simulation object, and we'll create a node for the structure, and then we'll pull in the structure. I do have the structure component working, although I did notice there's a little bit of an odd bug on it. A little bit of Z fighting here. Easily solved though. We'll just move this up a little bit. Yeah, there is a little bit of a strange bug in this little gap that's appearing right here, and it only happens in the editor. I'm not sure what that is. I'll have to look into it. Very odd, very odd. Let's go ahead and create another node. Call it light node, and on that one we'll create light. And let's make that a bit smaller. Move the light where it's a little more appropriate. And give our light a little bit of color. And once again, this is an easy one to forget. We have to do this every time though. And there is a little ... box you can click here and pull up this editor. This needs a little bit of cleanup. It's missing some borders and stuff. We'll get that sorted out. So So we'll save all that, and let's go try it out in the game. And I guess we'll just place our structure right here. Structure 1. And there we have it. So I don't yet have a way to edit the structures in the editor. Obviously, in previous videos, I've been working on a structure editor, and we'll get more to that in the future. It would be really nice to have a way to edit the structures directly, both in the game and in the structure editor. So there you go, just kind of a quick sample of how kind of easy it is to create new content, get it into the game. You can switch between the various projects you're working on, the various designs. And the one last step to this would be this publish button, which I also have working. And so it's automatically going to set the version on this. So basically what publish is going to do, I might rename this to package because that's maybe a little bit more accurate, is it's building a package out of all this. You can see kind of what's going to go into it. We do want to include the designs. And just like that, we now have a nice little, it's kind of like a zip file that you could give to someone else. They could start a new game and try it out. So basically modding works in Antilia at this point. So there's been a lot of work. It was quite a bit of an effort getting all this stuff, not just all these interfaces laid out. We've got project settings, Antilia link is working. The search doesn't work yet, but notifications I do have working. The resources window, quite a lot went into getting all this put together. And it's mostly for the other development teams, but also myself. It's really nice to have kind of a more polished process to create content and get it into Antilia. You can see how easy it was for me to put together something like this illuminated mushroom. Whereas before, if we take a look real quick at what this produces, so here's the actual file that it generates. You can see before I was editing this all by hand, and one, if you make any single little mistake like a missed comma or a missed bracket, anything like that can make the whole simulation object fail to load and maybe even crash Antilia. So it's really nice that one, all this stuff is just generated now. I also no longer have to memorize, because there was kind of like a lot of memorization, knowing that you had to specify exactly light component, not just light, axis rotations, all these strings have to be memorized. So not having to write all this, being able to just come in here and edit it and have nice features like these little gizmos that make it easy to move things around. It's obviously quite a bit of a help as far as productivity, getting things done. So this has been a huge, boost to the project. I think it'll be more fun for me to work on content, and especially as we start trying to bring in a lot of content into Antilia with all the biomes, all the plants, and all the rocks and stuff. This will be a tremendous use, and it'll also allow the other developers to finally start working on this stuff as well, because editing these text files was, a bit beyond most people who aren't programmers to edit the JSON files. So I think that's going to wrap it up. I'm sure there's probably more questions that could be asked. Do leave them in the comment section. I will try to respond, but maybe we'll need to do a follow-up video because there's quite a bit going on here. And I kind of rushed through a little bit of it just because there's so much. So that's going to do it for this week's update. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. A special thanks goes to this month's Patreon supporters. If you'd like to support the project, you can do so by visiting www.patreon.com/Antilia.